The 2021 season was already one with lots of controversy. Besides the harsh clashes between Verstappen and Hamilton and Horner and Wolff, there was also a major clash between the FIA and Mercedes. Whereas Hamilton seemed to cruise to his 8th world title, a late safety car and controversial decisions made him lose out. Obviously, this still sparks a lot of emotion from many fans, but after almost 10 months, most of that emotion cooled down. Yet a new scandal is on the rise that can seriously impact the sport and make the 2021 year even crazier than it already was. The 2021 season was the first season where the F1 teams had to work within a budget cap and a limited amount of wind tunnel and CFD time. Previously to the 2021 season, teams like Ferrari and Mercedes spent close to $500 million a year, but were now confined to just $145 million. The biggest reason to reduce the total spending was to make the playing field more equal. Teams like Williams and Haas could only spend up to $120 million and never had a real chance to build a race-winning car. To make F1 more sustainable, all teams agreed initially to set the budget cap at $175 million, but was eventually reduced by another $30 million to $145 million for 2021 and $140 million this year. Besides the budget cap, new rules were implemented to reduce aero testing time for the top teams and increase them for the last 4 constructors in the standings. So far, everything seems pretty clear, although the new rules to make the field more equal have had no visible effect. But although the rules didn't seem to affect the pecking order, they did affect the development rate of the teams. Both Red Bull and Mercedes heavily updated their cars in the first half of the 2021 season in the hope that they could create a big enough lead over the other to win both championships. Nonetheless, none of the teams eventually would create a sufficient enough lead over the other, which only prompted to develop their cars even further. But as the season progressed, both Horner and Wolff started to address the imposed budget cap and that less upgrades will be brought due to a lack of budget. In a championship where every update could mean the win or loss of the title, both teams went to the extreme. We know how the championship ended, but the FIA is now releasing all the teams' spending in 2021, and things don't look good. Auto, Motor, and Sport revealed that there are 2 teams who exceeded the budget cap in 2021. One of them is Aston Martin, and the other, Red Bull. Mercedes and Ferrari are furious and demand a fitting punishment for exceeding the budget cap. But what are the punishments for exceeding the budget cap? How is the budget cap regulated? What advantage did Red Bull gain by doing so? And what smart interpretation of the rules did Red Bull use? Let's find out. Towards the end of last season, Horner revealed they would continue updating their car for as long as possible to make sure they would have a real chance of winning the title. The last update came in Qatar, just 3 races before the end of the season. Although it had no major impact on the performances, as Hamilton won both in Qatar and Saudi Arabia and was on his way to win the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, it proves to what extent Red Bull went to develop their 2021 car. Moreover, the F1 would see the biggest rule changes in over 40 years for the 2022 season, which understandably would cost time and money to develop. Many experts claimed previously to this season that Red Bull would have a significant disadvantage coming into the 2022 season due to their lack of funding and development time. Yet so far, this season points to become one of the most dominating seasons of a team in F1 history. Verstappen already won 11 races, and with 6 more races to go, he still has a good chance of breaking the ultimate record of 13 race wins in a season, set by both Schumacher and Vettel. Although Red Bull is in to break some records, it isn't the first time they made it to the headlines regarding the budget cap. Earlier on in the season, Horner claimed that the budget cap needed a mid-season inflation correction due to the extreme rise in costs as a result of both COVID and the Ukraine-Russian war. Whereas 9 out of 10 teams agreed with the 3.1% inflation correction, Frederick Vasseur, team boss of Alfa Romeo, warned that teams would use the extra budget to further develop their car. This was further fueled when Red Bull, who stated at the end of May that without an increase in budget, a catastrophe would happen and they might have to skip out on the last 2 or 3 races, started to bring more and more upgrades after the inflation correction. Mercedes team boss Wolff said that he is surprised to see Red Bull bring so many updates this season, as Mercedes itself has no budget anymore to work on weight reduction, despite a strict financial administration. Ferrari team boss Mattia Binotto said in an interview at the end of August, "We know that we need to have a very strong FIA to make sure that they are properly focusing on monitoring the budget cap, because otherwise the regulation itself would not be fair and equitable." So how does the FIA monitor the team's spending? The cost cap only relates to expenses that alters the car performance, excluding marketing costs, race driver fees, and the costs of the team's 3 highest paid employees. Engine supply deals are also not part of the cost cap. This is important to know, as it would have seriously impacted the $143.1 million budget that is allowed this year. The FIA introduced a cost cap administration to monitor the financial regulations. However, Binotto criticized this department due to a lack of financial experts monitoring. He stated that there are just 7 financial experts that are put forward to go over everyone's books, whereas they have a much larger team for technical regulations. But what are the penalties for exceeding the budget cap? There are 3 categories of punishment. The first one is delivering the accounts too late. The second breach is when a team exceeds the budget cap by less than 5% of the total budget. And the third breach is when a team spends more than 5% of the total budget. Depending on the category a team falls in, they get penalized either through a fine or worse. If you are too late submitting your books, a team gets a fine. However, with a minor overspend breach, a team can get a reprimand, deduction in points, a ban for a certain number of races, limited testing, or a reduction of their cost cap. The third category may involve all of the above and exclusion from the championship. So how bad did Red Bull exceed the budget cap? Auto, Motor, and Sports says that Red Bull spent $5 million extra in 2021. Based on the $145 million budget cap of 2021, this means 3.4% extra spending, and therefore falls in the minor overspend breach. The situation is painful, as Red Bull won the Drivers' Championship last year and has a significant lead over the others this year. The FIA is expected to make a statement next week, but Ferrari and Mercedes are furious about the alleged breach. It is expected that Red Bull receives a fine because it is a first-time minor offense. However, Ferrari and Mercedes pursue a harsher punishment, as $5 million can make a significant difference in performance on track. They even mention numbers of half a second per lap. Red Bull's lead is so large that many experts wonder whether another team will be able to close the gap in the next couple years due to the reduced development rate as a result of the budget cap. But there is more. As previously stated, many teams wondered how Red Bull is able to bring so many upgrades this season. Some expect Red Bull to exceed the budget cap this year as well, although Horner has dismissed this multiple times. Yet, Auto, Motor, and Sport also revealed that Red Bull used another trick. So what smart trick did Red Bull use? F1 teams are constantly looking to interpret and bend the regulations to their own advantage. Normally, this was done to produce a certain car component, but it seems the fight has been moved to regular bookkeeping as well. Apparently, there is room for interpretation of the costs, so Red Bull used small bookkeeping to increase their actual spending, but prevented themselves from being punished too hard. Because of this room for interpretation, the FIA can't punish the team out of Milton Keynes too harshly. It proves that Red Bull's performance is not only limited to the track, but that they have also studied the regulations well enough to give themselves a competitive advantage financially. As an insider said, under this assumption, the additional money not only flowed into the 2021 car, but also into the development of the 2022 model, which would explain why Red Bull had such a strong start to the season, despite allegedly being the last team to switch their development team to this year's. What do you think the penalty of breaching the budget cap should be? Let me know in the comments section below.